Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of SDRescue, where we break down, review, and rewrite real sales emails out there. We're going on to episode 42, and as always, my name is Grayson Fulbright, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Austin Fuller. Austin, how you doing today, and what are we looking at today?
Hey, Grayson, doing well. So today we're going to be looking at a couple of things. One is going to be oftentimes when you're a salesperson, you're reaching out, you want to get to power and you want to get referred down from power. So we're going to look at ways to approach that, where you should target, how you write that email. We're going to look at a wrong way to write that email, and then we're going to see, okay, who should we target? What's the right message to get attached to something strategic and important in the company, so that when you do get referred down from power, it begins initiating a buying motion, or at least a consideration phase of that sales motion.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll share
And
my screen. I forgot that I'm the screen sharer.
Yep. While Austin's sharing his screen, the pieces I'm hoping to go into are social capital, because this is another kind of example of ways to use social capital to start a conversation or to build momentum towards next steps. So this is a tactic I don't think we've really reviewed before, which is kind of using multiple stakeholders or people around the prospect to try to pull in a conversation. And then the other thing I want to talk about is flow. We don't really get into this a lot, but one big kind of mantra behind my writing and when I'm trying to coordinate outreach is keeping every sentence connected to each other, where when you read it, the first sentence makes sense for then reading the second sentence, which then makes sense to read the third sentence. And I think one major problem that I see nowadays with a lot of sales outreach is that it seems to all be disconnected, almost as if different team members or different departments entirely were influencing the messaging. And it's apparent to prospects that read them that the flow is a little bit choppy. And so I'm hoping to kind of dive into that today.
Great. Let's jump in. Okay. So question about Newark's revenue. Hey, Austin, FYI, I contacted the current finance employee, the former CEO, and former marketing executive as well. We specialize in helping IT, MSP, cybersecurity, and tech services firms generate up to 5 times more retainers. My goal is simple: to leverage our marketing process to generate more revenue. Our IT, MSP client PCM saw a 1,260% increase in leads and a 67% reduction in cost through our marketing. My audit for Newark shows some hidden barriers that are restricting your lead flow. I can show you how to fix these and triple your leads with 3 simple strategies. How's Thursday for an exploratory call? Okay. Well, so I'll start with the message. We'll leave the being referred around things, as an aside, because I think even if you deleted, the email doesn't read that much different as far as an idea structure and how it works if you just delete the first email with social capital. Like, I think the social capital is completely worthless at the way they use it. So we'll set that aside, because you could just take that top line off and give it a haircut, and you could just say, we specialize in IT, MSP, blah, 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 right? And keep going. And it's the same email. There's no difference whether or not that's in there. And so I think that they lean a lot on that top line, expecting it maybe to help it get read. I'm not sure, because really when you break it down, this is a pretty straightforward show up and throw up email. This is what we do. Here's our outrageous claims. We have an audit that has information you want, but you can't have it unless you get on a call with me. How's Thursday work? And that's how I see the email.
Yeah, I think going beyond the messaging itself, I find it interesting that the way that they formatted the email flow almost worked against them. Because in my opinion, out of everything that they've said in this email, the most valuable is that line that finally, for the first time, mentions the fact that they have done some sort of audit. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier when it comes to flow and making sure that your sentences align with each other is, this salesperson probably could have astronomically changed their outcomes when they send this email by simply stating information that's necessary for people to read the rest of the email. Hey, I did an audit. Like, hey, I put the time in and did a review of your company to find X, Y, and Z. And that is a value add that you can offer and present to a prospect to differentiate yourself and to say, hey, I'm not just some regular sales rep reaching out with automation. I did some work and I'm here to show it to you. And I think it was almost a loss for them because not only did they not mention the audit or the value add here in the email until the very end, but every line that came before that has zero to do with the audit. If you take each line before that last audit line and you read it individually, none of it has anything to do with the purpose of the email. FYI, I contacted some people. Okay, great. We specialize in helping these people do this. Okay, cool. My goal is simple, to do this. Our clients get this. Okay, great. Why are you reaching out? And then finally, in the fourth line, they actually bring the context of, hey, this is why I'm reaching out. This is who I am. And this is what I want from you. And when it comes to sales, especially email, where buyers have full control over their inbox, you don't get to see how they interact with their emails. You don't want to format your messaging in that way to where it's almost like, hey, I want you to read through some marketing jargon for 3 to 4 sentences, and then I'll actually tell you why I'm reaching out and why you should spend time with me. In today's world, I'd say it's very much the opposite. People really don't care what you do and who you are, even if you're a top brand, even if you have all the case studies in the world for their situation. What buyers really care about now is sales experience. What are the sellers doing to show the buyer that they are understood, that somebody is kind of staying on top of their situation, and that somebody is equipped with either the knowledge or the resources to help them out? None of that has anything really to do with whatever solution or service that you might be selling. What it gets down to is when you're communicating with a customer, how are you going to navigate them through this journey of not having any idea what's going on, to seeing a pain, to actually pinpointing the pain, to then finding the solution? To kind of recap my thoughts, I think this email would have been a lot better had they focused purely on the audit angle and figured out a way to add benefits and add an incentive to actually following through on that audit.
Yeah, I don't know why people claim, like, okay, there's two schools of thought, right? Like, I mean, oftentimes an audit or something is just a veiled sales pitch. I mean, there are times where, like, for example, so people have done it in product-led companies a lot. So you look at like SEO companies like Moz or something, you can actually just get an audit of your page and it spits out the results and things you could fix. Now, and then therefore you can buy Moz or SEMrush or whatever it is and work on fixing the things found in the audit. I find that, oftentimes the audit is just like, hey, I'm going to show up and give you a slide deck of what we do. And you're right. I think that if, a lot of outreach is just that's a really big issue that's broken in outbound sales right now, is that there's no thought put into what, like, structuring a complete play together. You know what I mean? Like, everything is just, okay, can we gather people in market typically and have a sales meeting with them or qualify them and move them through a sales process? We oftentimes just want to push people into our sales process as opposed to building plays and experiences for buyers to get them to move them into a buying motion. Like you're saying, it could be an actual audit that has value. It could be, sometimes it's an interview. We talk about interviews. We talk about surveys. We talk about, things that actually engage buyers and do provide value, whether or not they enter a buying motion. And that's and a lot of most of the emails we review lack any sort of strategy behind that. And I think that people have to recognize that if you want to continue to do outbound, the meta has far evolved. Like, you have to be much more complex and much more thoughtful into what you're going to do. And then I'm going to go one step further, because I'm going to bridge this thought into social capital and getting to power and using power to to initiate some kind of buying motion like they try to do here. This is just a weak attempt. The social part, this is just a flat out weak attempt. I just want to go and I want to make sure to call this practice out. Like, I'm sorry, saying that you sent emails to people carries no weight. It doesn't matter. I email people all the time. I don't have to tell people about it. If you have contact, if you have a conversation with people, that's meaningful, right? But when you do get a conversation or have some communication with someone, make sure that you pull something out that's valuable that you can use later. And we'll talk about how to do that a little bit when we go into the rewrite. But first off, the biggest things are 2 of the people that they reference don't even work at the company anymore. So I'm glad they emailed them. I don't even know if they did. It's probably a lie. One is the former CEO and one's the former head of marketing. And then the person that actually does still work here works in finance. Like they do accounting and billing and stuff like that. Like it's not even close to sales or marketing. So just keep that in mind. Like the premise of the email, I think with the social capital just doesn't work. There's no weight behind saying you contacted people. You can't use that unless you've actually had a conversation. You need to have some kind of meaningful exchange. And we can talk about more how to go into that in the rewrite.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I wanted to show an example of the complexity nowadays with outbound by kind of digging into the audit sentence specifically.
Yeah, go ahead.
You'll notice, and you'll notice out of everything in this email, the one that has the most color and the choppiest color is that audit line. And here's why. There are 2, what I would say, bad practices being done here, both involving assumptions. One, I don't ever, and I try not to ever, include an assumption about my prospect or the prospect's business when I'm giving them a value offer. So if I'm trying to say, hey, if I'm trying to help their business with, let's say, SEO, and I want to offer them an audit, I'm not going to say, I would like to offer you an audit to show you the mistakes and barriers and challenges your team hasn't fixed yet. That not only is that very like accusatory, but they're all assumptions. You cannot truly know what a business or an organization is doing until they've given you that access. And so when you use assumptions inside of value add, it almost flattens, it removes the incentive. It's like, oh, you're wanting to show me a thing that you think is correct? No, thanks. The second piece that also ties into this is when you use assumptions and try to include pains, when you're bringing up pain points and they're driven by an assumption you make, they're almost disregardable because it's not evidence, it's not data, it's not a fact. You're not talking about a pain that you know as a seller in the market. You're not talking about a pain that you as a seller know for a specific client or a use case. You're making a claim. You're making a claim about potential pain that this specific prospect or business might be experiencing. And so when you include assumptions, when you're trying to highlight pains that your persona might be going through, it's very risky to use your business type phrases when you're presenting those pains, because it's very easy for prospects to misinterpret what you're talking about. And instead of coming to the realization that that pain is a pain they have, which is the point, right? You want them to self-realize that they need to find a solution. Instead of that, it's really easy for prospects to go the other way and say, I'm going to push this guy away because whether he's right or not, he is being accusatory and acting like he knows more than me. He's trying to endanger my career. I'm going to push them away. And so I think that is just one example using this email of how complicated outreach and conversations in sales can be. And those are just 2, right? One, when you're offering value, you got to be careful how many assumptions you make when you're trying to offer an incentive for next steps. And then 2, when you're trying to paint a picture and get your prospects to feel something, you don't want to use assumptions to attach it to them. You don't want the pain and the negativity to be something that's their fault. It needs to be an observation. So we can move to the rewrite if you want, unless you have any other comments, Austin. But I just wanted to bring that up. I thought that the last line there was most interesting in terms of like things to learn for copywriting.
Yeah, it could, and that's the problem. Is so here's the thing: is people aren't willing to think ahead and invest the time and effort. A lot of I'm calling sales management out here because you know, we want metrics and dashboards and hit quotas, blah, blah, blah. And so we put reps in this position. We also don't coach reps on how to do this. That's the other thing. We just tell them make more numbers and it'll fall, you know, it'll fall out the bottom. You know, if you make 100 calls, you'll get this many opportunities. So a huge disservice by sales management here. Like, empower your reps to do something that's meaningful to them. As opposed to just saying, hey, we have an audit. Here's some vague things that I'm assuming are wrong with you. Hop on a call with me and I'll give it to you. Like, I mean, it's just not compelling. Like, people are, nobody will get on that call. I mean, unless they're bleeding in pain. Like, I mean, you've got to really be in market. So it'll be the vast minority of buyers. Alrighty, the rewrite. Here we go. Hey, Austin, Kevin Pierce mentioned that it would make sense for us to connect. We've found that MSPs often have difficulty finding initial traction because their sales reps struggle transitioning from other verticals. I know you've recently launched your services for community banks and credit unions, so I was hoping to share a playbook an MSP recently used to successfully, sorry, typo here, to successfully launch into financial institutions. Can I follow up with the link? All right. Social capital to power our to power something meaningful, I think is the play here. So first off, I want to go into why I chose the person that I did. So Kevin Pierce isn't my boss. I don't report to him. He's who my boss reports to. He's my boss's boss. And that's important when using, well, one, you have to understand where you sit, who you're targeting in the organization. But one, that's the person I want to impress. The person that promotes me is my boss's boss, not my boss. My boss doesn't promote me. So if I want to look good in the company, I need people 2 levels above me saying, hey, about that Austin guy, he crushes it. So that's the person I want to impress. And that's also the person, like, if you're going to come from my, like, things that I would want, if you're going to be really targeted about a persona. But the other thing is that strategic things are going to come from that level. So it's going, the people 2 levels above where I'm at are going to be where more strategic things are going to be happening. And that means it's going to have money attached. It's going to have urgency attached a lot of times. If you can find a way to get your exploratory conversation attached to potentially be something that attaches to a strategic initiative that the company does want done, you're going to have a much easier time. It's going to be much more qualified. They're going to probably have money allocated. Some companies don't budget that aggressively, but for our big initiatives, we set aside a bunch of budget and we say, okay, we don't want to spend this all, but we're willing to look at solutions to make this happen so that these things can be accomplished. And so we have money, we're willing to spend the money, and we don't wait around for 6 months going back and forth with 12 vendors, right? I mean, we may do a couple of vendors, but the competition is going to be much less and we're going to decide much faster. So you're going to have better opportunities if you can get to that level of power, or at least have your exploratory conversation inside of the context of that strategic initiative. And strategic initiatives only come from people high enough up.
Yeah, I agree. I really like your use of social capital here. And I wanted to highlight that this is a great example of great selling mixed into great copywriting, because so much is said in this small 1-line sentence, right? I know it just, all it says to someone like me who isn't you is some guy mentioned that it makes sense for them to connect with Austin, right? But what this really says to Austin in this short one little line is, hey, I know the people that you need to be talking to make a deal happen, and already went ahead and had the proactiveness to connect with them, discuss the solution, and get approval beforehand to connect with you. It's almost like when we talk about guiding a buyer through the process, when we're guiding a buyer through the stages, that is literally it. You're saying, hey, don't even worry about it, bro. Don't worry about having to talk to Kevin to see if this is even something worth looking into. I did that for you. And I am already reaching out to let you know it's done. Let's connect. That's some powerful copywriting. But this is what I wanted to highlight here. I would love to be able to write something like this for every email I send, because it's so impactful and it's great use of social capital. But not everybody can write this. This immediately differentiate you as a seller because you went in and did the work and you have the proof to say, listen, I've had these conversations, I've organized this path, come with me. I just wanted to highlight that's amazing.
Yeah, and I put in the first line. Like if there isn't a bunch of junk that gets thrown into your first line, like on our email servers, um, this is an email that's going to get at least opened. When you put some, like even if it's an external sender, if that person's name is in there and says that we should be connecting, I'm at least going to read it. You
Right.
earn that because, and that's the power of social capital. Now look, and I know that SDRs out there and other salespeople will go, well, I can't do that for every deal. No, you can't. I mean, some deals it's not as good, right? But this is what you should be aiming for and thinking about ways you can formulate plays to get in with these people and to get these types of conversations. Another part, so and Grayson really helped on it. This was a collab effort. This is the I was going to say a mixtape brought to you by both of us. We collabed on this one. Grayson really did a good job organizing these ideas. Originally, the second line was actually after the third one, but if you look here, this is a really good organization of ideas because one, you get the social proof that gets the email opened at least and read. And he says, hey, we found that MSPs often have difficulty finding initial traction because their sales reps struggle from transitioning from other verticals. So essentially, hey, when you launch into a new vertical, your sales reps are used to how it's done before. And right, so this sets context around why I'm reaching out because guess what? Probably talked to Kevin and they talked about launching into the new vertical, right? So I don't have to say I had a long conversation with Kevin and we know each other really well. I do that I demonstrate it through the writing. That's one thing. The second thing is that it's a problem and it's wide enough to where it gets a conversation started instead of saying, hey, we have this solution or hey, we need to talk about what we do. You're talking about a problem that the reader probably has.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to add something onto that.
No, I do want to add. I think what I love about this email is it fixes the exact problem that I had with the original, which is all of the sentences work together and are structured in a way to where it naturally flows together. You can read the whole email backwards and it all makes sense. And so I just kind of want to walk through what Austin has done here and why I think this is kind of such a good rewrite. So when he goes in and leverages the social capital, often the prospect is going to be saying, cool, you had a conversation with someone important and you're immediately on my radar now. What are you wanting to connect about? And so Austin immediately frames by offering knowledge and experience from his brand that said, hey, we found that MSPs, which is you, the person I'm talking to, often have these difficulties getting to this future state. He immediately paints a picture. So he's saying, hey, I talked to this guy. He thinks we should connect. Why? Well, let me just tell you what I found. So it almost answers questions in the background and it's little check boxes without you having to say anything. You're already saying, Kevin mentioned that you should connect with me. Why? Because you found some information about a future state I want and the pains behind it. And then you go into the kicker and say, okay, we found these things and I know that this thing that's relevant to what I just said is true for your business. And so you're connecting it all together. The whole point here is like, why would you even say the story? Like, what's the point of the story of saying we found that MSPs have these difficulties? What's the point of saying that story if there's nothing to tie it back to? Austin here tied back that story to the actual value he wanted to give. He said, we found that this is a difficulty, and I know that you are in this situation. So I'm hoping to offer a playbook. You see how easy it is for me to make those into sentences? Is because Austin wrote this idea really well and structured it in a way to where I'm sure I could probably give this to a rep on your team, Austin, and they could probably digest this and use this in their process because it's so well structured.
Nice. Yeah, and the other thing here too is if you look at so you look at the third line here where it says, I know you've recently launched. You can read through this entire email and never do I say, so I talked to Kevin and I know you're having problems getting traction with banking and community banks and financial institutions. And I never say that. The prospect knows that. They know they have that. And the thing is, as a seller, I don't need to know the exact problem. You don't want to be the person telling them what their exact problem is. You want the seller to tell you what their exact problem is, because it's the only way to communicate in terms of how the buyer, sorry, you need the buyer to tell you what their exact problem is. So I think that's really important, is even if you have a conversation with someone and you hear them tell you something, you have to assume that I'm going in knowing that this person I'm getting referred to may have a completely different perspective on what's going on. And oftentimes, especially in the enterprise, when you're doing big organizations, the people that are 2 levels above where your buying committee normally starts are going to have no clue practically what's happening oftentimes. I mean, that's hyperbole. They're just not going to be in the weeds as much, right? Because in the enterprise and Fortune 2000 and up organizations, they're really large. They have a lot of people under them. They don't know exact all the time. And so you need to go and play this as, hey, I have generic things that are about this problem. I mean, it's not generic, it's a specific category of problem. And hey, these are reasons, and I have something that could help you out. What Grayson did was awesome with his CTA. His CTA is super easy. It says, can I follow up with the link? That means you can easily just hit reply yes, right? You want to make sure the reply, what Grayson does really well in his writing, especially as far as like conversions and getting replies and starting conversations, is he eliminates you don't want someone to have to write out a sentence or a paragraph to reply to you. If they reply and just have to type yes, it's probably even typed that, but Google AI probably does it now. The Gmail AI or the Office 365 on mobile, they'll just pre-populate yes, and they just swipe on their mobile device or tab on the keyboard. It's done. So I love that. I think that this email is really good. There aren't like there's emails I write where I'm like, it could be better, whatever. This one I actually feel, especially with Grayson's help on this, I feel like this is a solid formulation of an email, right? Like the problems could be changed, the person's name could be changed, but this is a really good formula, I think, for using social proof, because it leverages the problem going on with the buyer. The buyer feels like they're in control. It feels like you're listening and you're coming endorsed. I don't know. I just feel, and it's really low barrier entry to say yes to. I just feel really good about it all around.
Yeah, I do as well. And I think that's one point to make, is this email is designed in a way to where you could kind of, extract all the core personalization. And yeah, you could repurpose this email really for any industry. All you need to do is figure out the core way to structure a conversation or an argument. And so what we're doing here is, hey, this person mentioned it makes sense to connect. We found this thing is difficult to get this future state because of these challenges. I know this thing about your business and was hoping to share this value to help get to this future state. Can I follow up with a link? Done. If you can figure out those pieces, then you get enough info not only to make your own email, but to start testing and trying to optimize not only the specific emails you're sending, but the full journey. So
Yeah, and look, and that's the thing is these. So here's the pleas that I get from a lot of sales reps, and again, I empathize with sales reps because it's typically management that puts you in a bad spot. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and that's why I really believe that top performers do all this stuff and it feels really natural to them, whereas people who are middle tier to struggling to hit quota, people that really struggle to convert, especially if you have to run a full desk and you're not fed enough stuff from your SDRs, BDRs, or if you are an SDR or BDR and you're struggling to get certain lead pools to convert or get into conversations, get in through your cold outreach, it's because you're not doing all the stuff that makes the email good, right? Like this email has to have stuff happen. You can't just send this out. I can't just sit down and write it and send it out. That's gone. That only worked so well before, and it's only going to get progressively worse. There's been a patch. If any of you play Dota or any competitive esport game, there's a new patch. The competitive meta is different. This is the table stakes now. I really believe that is, if you want to have good conversations and good outbound results where you're not just plodding through, you have to do the work beforehand to get in front of these people. So maybe that's something we do a little bit in the future, is maybe we talk about how you get referred up or referred down from power, how to have those calls. But a lot of the emails, like, so to talk to Kevin, a lot of the emails we've done before and reviewed before would be really great to get an initial conversation with somebody. You just have to make sure you're targeting the right person, and then you're going to follow it up with this one.
Yeah.
We're at time. It's right at 12. So.
All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone who joined us today. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, and you can find a recording of this episode if you weren't able to join us live. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Join us every week on Monday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll be reviewing emails like this. And please send over your emails if you want us to check them out. We keep them anonymous. If you want to join as a guest or just kind of hop on and interact, feel free to, and reach out to Austin or myself on LinkedIn, and we'll get in touch to see if we can get something scheduled.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.